I have been with the financial services sector for long. Before Dun& Bradstreet, I was with non-financial services conglomerate, IFL, then before that with Yes Bank, with Axis Bank. And I've seen that transition of BFSI sector coming from a very traditional kind of setup where branch was everything. Insurance was through direct agency or broker. Mutual funds were sold offline totally. And during my stint with Axis Bank, having been part of the wealth management team interacting with AMCs, I saw the slow transition into digitalization, starting from the digitalization of backend processes, then to digitalization of application form, which was, at that point of time, it seemed surprising, a huge thing to happen. And slowly and slowly, each banks, AMCs, insurance, etc. And I'm not talking about the fintechs, insurtech. That word, those terms weren't even coined then. And each of these actually started with a e-business, starting with taking small steps on first on just gathering leads, and then moving on to more straight-through processes. And these have been slow but sure steps. But then there was a point of inflection, I think somewhere around 2014-15, where 10 years ago there was a point of inflection, digital really boomed. And I'm talking about digital not in terms of just the apps of the world, of course that made a transition, but also very importantly, that transition also happened in the mindsets of those who were managing these organizations. The demonetization also sped up the whole digitalization process, and ultimately the pandemic, very unfortunate phase in humanity, but it really accelerated digitalization. And that is one of the things what we feel has been important. We have been doing this for more than a decade, these summits, and every year, every summit, there is always something on what's next. Because for all, it might seem like a very regulated sector, BFSI, it is probably the most dynamic of all sectors. That's what I personally feel. And here I would talk a brief about the BFSI industry right now, just setting the context for the conference today. So what are the new paradigms that are there? Globally first, globally BFSI, of course, like in India, unprecedented disruptions, a lot is happening. That monumental shift is actually because, one, there are a lot of disruptive technologies which are there now. And we are talking primarily because AI has accelerated. Ever since ChatGPT came into the fore, it's not that AI is something a new thing. It's been there for more than half a century. But it has really made it into a toy into everyone's hands. So players in the BFSI industry are investing a lot into AI-driven investments. So legacy IT systems are something which have to go. Second, the non-bank competition. Now, there's always that banks are trying to be fintechs, fintechs are trying to be banks, and that is something which the industry has always seen. But what is said is that by 2030, the fintech sector is estimated to hold up to 7% of the global financial revenue. 7%, that's a big thing, purely for fintechs. So because all fintechs, even the tech giants, something like embedded finance, etc., everyone is providing those kind of banking services, not just in lending, but also payments, etc. So you'll see that big disruption. Third is, of course, new regulatory compliance. And the most prominent being data privacy. It's right now all the rage. The DPDPA rules are coming into force. By 2026, even the India's landscape would have changed. And here we are talking about globally. Globally, Europe and US and even China to some extent have been quite ahead of us as far as the data privacy regulations are concerned. And India, are we prepared for it? Let's discuss that today. So India itself, but coming to our focus, India is also harnessing technology. In fact, I can say that for all kinds of sectors, whether it's digital payments or insurtech, financial inclusion, everywhere. I'll give you some examples. Most prominent being UPI. Now, UPI is, of course, a poster boy for Indian fintechs. It's a jewel crown. And the volumes have reached 17 billion in January 2025. That's massive. On the fintech side, India has the highest adoption of fintech. 87%. When I say 87%, it means that 87% organizations are using fintech in at least one of their processes. Now, this is much higher than the global average also. And that is the more important point which I want to highlight. InsurTech, we are the second largest InsurTech market in the world. in Asia Pacific, sorry. We are growing by about 15x, and that's actually being leaps and bounds. That's an exponential growth. Imagine what the situation would be by 2030. Digital lending, and that is something which fintechs have really accelerated. Extremely important. It's expected to grow by about 515 billion, sorry, by 2030. And this is something which Jan Dhan Yojana, not very much talked about till the time banks were told to open more Jan Dhan accounts. But one of the biggest accelerations, even I would peg it, the success of UPI is also dependent on the Jan Dhan, with the huge numbers of accounts that were opened. 53.14 crore beneficiaries banked under this scheme. Now that is the kind of financial inclusion you really look about. And that has accelerated the growth of UPI. Okay. So the three, of course, there are many things which are changing, transforming the India sector. But I'll pick up three which are more important, which we'll discuss here. One is transformation in the digital transformation landscape, digital payment landscape. Second is growth of fintechs, that is the tech innovations which are happening. And third is India's demographic dividend. I'll just touch upon each of these for the benefit of the audience. Digital payment landscape, and I'm talking about globally as well. 90% of consumers made digital payments last year in Europe, 90%. Now, it's big in US as well, and it's big in China as well. I've given you the numbers. But that's only the context to what is happening in India. 350 million active UPI users. 350 million active UPI users. That's huge. Which means we have surpassed platforms like Alipay, PayPal, and Brazil's Pix, which is actually quite big. Now, we have the top spot globally in terms of payments. That's what we call really leading the world. UPI, in fact, delving more on it, it has actually transformed everything. So if you look at high adoption by consumers and also high growth, you find UPI is there right on the top, amongst other things. Okay? It's more representative graph to give you an idea that there have been those which have high adoption, like the prepaid instruments, debit card, but the growth is low. UPI is there at the top. And it has a huge contribution to digital payments in India. In 2018, only 8%. Now the share has become 83%. And why we say it has changed the landscape, geographically also. It's not an urban phenomenon. It's not a tier 1 phenomenon. Even on the tier 2, tier 3, not just with individuals, peer-to-peer, but also with businesses. It has changed the whole landscape there. So India itself has been emerging as a leader in the fintech space. Now, this is a very important statistic which we are presenting, is that while, of course, China is doing great, all kudos to it, but in the fintech space, India is ranked third. So number of fintechs, we are very high. Yes, number of unicorns are still small, but that's because of various reasons there. It has got great funding, it has got great growth, good number of deals that are happening, and we can truly call ourselves a global leader in fintech space, if not the overall startup space. So I was talking about the AI adoption rate, where we are one of the leaders, and where we are talking about that in BFSI, at least one of the process is using AI in its space. And why we stress it in every such platform? Because one, it is now part of life. Like we used to talk about computers at one point of time, we used to talk about machine learning at this one point of time. RPA, we used to talk about it a lot in our processes. But now AI is the thing. But we need to understand it also better. We still need to harness its processes. There are 3 AI/ML approaches, which means that you use AI/ML in these 3 processes more than anything else. One is customer service, second is fraud detection, and third is credit underwriting. So in the BFSI fintech space, across all kinds of sectors within BFSI, these are the 3 major ones where AI/ML is being used. In fact, what is encouraging, what is heartening also, is a recent quote by the Department of Financial Services, where they have said banks are directed. So sometimes we have to look at the words also. Banks are directed to adopt advanced technologies, including AI/ML. It's not encouraged, it's not urged, they are directed to adopt. And this also gives a direction every time to banks and other sectors. So that is again because they have focused a lot on fraud detection and prevention, and rightly so. And we will discuss in the first panel discussion also on this in greater detail. Third, when I was talking about the demographic dividend, and of course Gen Zs and millennials are actually driving the growth. They want simpler processes, they want at-home services, they want elimination of paperwork, they don't have the patience, that is why they need quick approvals. And another very surprising statistic was, when you talk about digital lending disposals in India, about 1.5, 1.6 lakh crore, the Gen Zs get a quarter of the share. That's a big amount specifically for Gen Zs. And if you include millennials, it's practically every 3 in 4 going to Gen Zs and millennials because of digital lending again. Here I'm highlighting that importance. So they prefer the digital solutions. In fact, new Demat account holders, about 50 of them are under the age of 30 years. And that's financial inclusion not in terms of just lending, but financial inclusion also in terms of bringing them into the investment space. Of course, digital lending in India, therefore, is all set to increase by 5%. So these are just statistics. I'm not delving into the detail because these things we will be discussing in detail during our panel discussions. So with new paradigms, every time we think there should be something new, and we need to therefore rethink the future. Therefore, Dun & Bradstreet has launched what we call the Rethinking the Future. So across the year, we will be releasing various reports on how we can rethink the future of various sectors. So other sectors will come, but today we will be releasing our publication, our report on rethinking the future of the BFSI and FinTech Center. So that will have a lot of insights. We will be uncovering new trends and understanding them better. So that's from my side today, setting the context of this conference. And our MC should also be here very soon to take us forward to the next sessions. Thank you very much. We'll meet soon.